Okay, so hi, thanks for joining me this evening. I'm Charlotte Mann. I work as an energy advisor at Arran EcoSavvy. So it's a charity based on the Isle of Arran. The Scottish Government funds us similarly as they fund the Selkirk Group. So we virtually crossed paths earlier this year. So I worked with Sustainable Selkirk for a couple of months on the energy side of the project, and I have been qualified to complete energy performance certificates for over 2 years now. And as the only assessor on Arran, the service has proven to be quite high demand. But the main goal of all CCF groups is to reduce the carbon emissions in the local area, which is usually through food, travel, waste, and energy. To meet this aim, I currently only offer EPCs to residents who are committed to improving the energy efficiency of their homes, either via insulation or renewables. And then use the EPC as a tool along with more personalised advice, energy advice from myself. So that's kind of introduction. So what is an EPC? So an EPC is short for an Energy Performance Certificate. So it's a report that assesses the energy efficiency of a property. It considers things like how old and how well insulated the property is. The certificates are rated from A to G, with A being the most energy efficient and G being the least. It will display the current rating and the potential rating if the recommended improvements are completed within the document. They usually cost around £40 to £120, depending on the size and the complexity of the property. And they are valid for 10 years, although if any changes are made structurally or to anything within the house, it's best to update it. The image on the left is actually a screenshot of my own EPC for the property I currently rent. So I did that EPC. So it's quite a good example of an average EPC for Scotland, the rating, and any following screenshots I've used are also from this EPC. So this graph is the most important part of the it's usually 6 or 7 pages, the document, but this graph's the most important. There's a lot of general info on the certificate, which is only really interesting if it is your own home. So I've tried to include the most important parts as images. So the benefits of an EPC, of course, you get your energy efficiency rating. They last for 10 years. They identify areas for home improvement. They provide costs and savings, and you can compare them with other households. So I will go into more detail about the first 4 points, but on the compare with other households part, once your EPC is completed, it is publicly accessible online on the Scottish EPC Register website. So on there, you can search by postcode and all valid EPCs will come up and are also downloadable. So you can see houses in the same neighbourhood as you that were built at the same time and see the differences. Many people may have an EPC already on their house and not realise, so this is quite often if people have recently moved into a property in the last few years, and so you can check on this website before you book another one that there is a valid one there, and check the date to see if there's been any improvements. And you can also use the same website to search for your local assessor so you can book someone. So when an EPC is required, there's been a few rules come in recently that a lot of people aren't aware of when you actually do need an EPC for a house. So for buying and selling, all domestic properties which are sold or marketed after the 1st of December 2008, which is when EPCs were introduced, they have to have an EPC in place at the commencement of marketing activities. So for this is usually included as part of the home report survey, so you don't need to usually book someone out separately. That'll just be part of the survey they do. For long-term lets, this is a fairly recent regulation. Since the 1st of April 2020, landlords can no longer let or continue to let properties covered by the Minimum Energy Efficiency Standard regulations, so MEES for short, if they have an EPC rating below E, so unless they have a valid exemption in place. So there is a cost cap on this, as some of the improvements recommended can be quite expensive. So the landlords will never be required to spend more than £3,500, including VAT, on these improvements. And if the property cannot be improved to an EPC E for this amount or less, all improvements which can be made up to that amount should be then completed, and then you'd have to make an exemption should be registered online. So yeah, that's a fairly new regulation, and I think there is a lot of properties that are let out, especially on Arran with the poor housing stock, where they are a level E or below. So then for holiday lets, there's no minimum rating requirements. However, it is now a requirement under law that the EPC must be affixed within the property. So building standards guidance suggests the EPC be located in either a boiler or a meter cupboard. It is also required to include a mention of the EPC rating in any advertisements or promotional materials printed or online. And finally, renewables. So I'll go into more detail on the next slide regarding grants, but you do need a recent and valid EPC with some conditions met to be able to apply for the Home Energy Scotland interest-free loan for renewables. So this is a very popular loan scheme, which I do recommend as it is interest-free. However, the application process can be long, and understandably there are some conditions for this. So for example, a fabric first approach is most effective in reducing carbon and lowering heating bills. So it wouldn't be cost effective for Home Energy Scotland to give out a loan of 10 grand for an air source heat pump if it's installed in a poorly insulated and drafty old farmhouse, as the heat pump would then have to overwork to cope with demand. So EPCs and renewables carried on, and even more sought after financial aid is the renewable heat incentive. So the domestic renewable heat incentive, otherwise known as the RHI, facilitates subsidies from the government for using renewable heating solutions. So an EPC is the first step in your application for approval post-installation. It is used by Ofgem to gauge how energy efficient your property is by looking at the estimated heat load. So that's the hot water and heating requirements of the property. And then this helps to determine the size of payments that you receive. So the RHI is paid quarterly over 7 years at the current tariff rate shown in the bottom of this table. So they haven't changed since this has last been updated. They've kept the same throughout this year, but you can see over the years they have kind of gone up a wee bit. So for a 4-bed house in the UK, this could be up to £900 a year in payments from this. And the scheme has recently been extended up to March 2022. But again, these applications can be quite long, so it's worth being aware of the different requirements and expenses beforehand, such as the EPC that you'd need to sort out after you've had your installation. And so this is again another screenshot from my EPC house that I'm staying at right now. So what can you find in your EPC? So on the certificate itself, this is a fairly interesting section to look at. It gives each element a rating out of 5 stars, and this is computer generated from the data input by the assessor. The 2 different walls and floors in the descriptions indicate an extension with a different construction type and date. So each part of those has a different rating due to this. And you can see in this example that my house is well insulated and does hold heat well, but that the old style storage heaters are lowering the rating and are not energy efficient, which I can certainly testify to, as they are a nightmare to try and control what heat comes in and out of them. And this is another screenshot from that EPC, which gives estimated costs for improvements and estimates your energy costs over a period of 3 years. So you can, on the top snapshot, you can see the estimated current energy costs and the potential energy costs if you install the suggestions in the bottom table, which are ordered in order of importance. So floor insulation is top. And it's also worth noting that the energy rating after improvement part, so where it says D63 onwards, that is cumulative. So that would be if you did all of these improvements. So as you can see at the top part, lighting is fairly inexpensive, and there would be no improvement over 3 years, as I've already installed the LEDs throughout. I would like to emphasise that these are estimates and that a reduced SAP EPC, such as the ones I've been talking about, they use many pre-programmed assumptions the assessor has no control over. So you would not be asked for your energy bills or tariffs in regards to an EPC assessment. And with the lighting, the only fittings that are recorded are fixed fittings, so not table lamps, for example. So this is to show that no matter who the occupant of the property is and what their daily household habits are, the system and construction of the house will stay the same. And the estimates are based on an average UK household. And what is involved in the assessment itself? So finally, if this has encouraged you to find a local assessor and book a survey, here are some of the things that the assessor should be doing at the visit. So number one is photos and lots of them. Every assessor has an accreditation body who has a regular and strict auditing process. So the information we input into our laptops must match what was seen in person, and photos is a way to prove that this is the case. Secondly, a floor plan, which can be done digitally or by hand. Even if there are floor plans available on planning permission website, for example, the assessor does need to note different things that wouldn't perhaps be on there, such as different types of showers. And of course, to complete the floor plan, they will need measurements. So these will include wall thickness, insulation thickness, and area of the house. So overall, the assessments can take between about half an hour to an hour, depending on how big the house is. The complexities and the size of the property do play into the time it takes, and therefore that's what the cost is based on. So once the assessor collects all this data and has put it into a software that generates the final certificate, which you can then access on the database online, and the EPC assessor will download it and send it to you so you can print it out and have it as a PDF.